Hi everyone, welcome back to UMass Yak Back. This is your host, Jake Liberty. I've gotten a lot of work done since you've last seen me. Today we're going to be talking about some interesting stuff. Columbus Day, why do we celebrate it and why do we call it Columbus Day? Should it be called Indigenous Peoples Day? We're also going to talk about Donald Trump, of course, how could we not? And then lastly, we're going to be talking about millennials, us. Why do we like food better than sex? Like, what's the deal with that? We'll figure it out. Hi, welcome back to UMass Yak Back. I'm here with Robbie, Molly, and Bernsey. And right now we're going to talk about how Amherst has legally changed the name of Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. And I mean, I think it's kind of makes sense, but there are also some issues with it. Robbie, what do you think about it?
Honestly, I'm very confused by the whole thing. Columbus Day in a whole sense, in a holistic view. As we were brought up, learning in elementary school, we always thought Columbus was like the man. He's like the guy who founded America. Like, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Columbus. So I understand that there's these rumors that he was a terrible person.
I don't think it's rumors.
Well,
really.
Well, then I need to know the facts.
Okay. Do either of you guys want to talk on this?
Well, I think that sports fans probably prefer, at least Boston sports fans probably prefer Columbus Day because the Indians killed the Red Sox the other day. So.
Well, my thing about it is Columbus was someone who committed genocide on an entire group of indigenous people. But is just renaming Columbus Day Indigenous Peoples Day righting those wrongs, righting the fact that we've celebrated him for tons of years?
So he gave them smallpox.
Yeah, and he was
Smallpox.
But was that an intentional thing?
Well, obviously smallpox was not intentional, but we're raised to think that we were friendly to Native American people when we showed up, but we weren't.
Yeah, he still brutalized an entire grouping of people that were
genocide.
Yeah, genocide that had been here prior to us. And I think my thoughts on it are that I do think Christopher Columbus did some historical things. I don't think they're necessarily positive. They did lead to us being here today in some way, shape, and form. But I don't know that necessarily swapping Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day makes sense. I don't know if it is supposed to be some kind of protest, like they're trying to make a point about it, or if we should just not have Columbus Day and pick a different day for Indigenous Peoples Day. I'm curious why just swapping out the day and changing the name of it, if that has a certain message to it.
Yeah, there are definitely pros and cons to both. Bernsey, what do you think about the way we're taught when we're growing up about Christopher Columbus and the way we got here?
Yeah, well, I was thinking about that, and we always get that Monday off. And to me, that's odd, those types of holidays, that it happened 500 years ago or something like that. And it's a holiday for everyone in the country. And I was thinking about that. I asked my mom, why do we celebrate this guy? And we are taught from a young age that he's this hero. Mm-hmm. I think it's the fact that he's known as the first person to land, to be the first American, but there were Native Americans living there for years before. So I think that's why maybe I don't know, I'm not huge on the facts, but swapping that because he wasn't the first American.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are you thinking, Robbie?
I'm thinking along the lines of Game of Thrones at the moment. It's like one kingdom coming over to another kingdom and taking it over. What's the difference?
That's true. I see your point, but it's also
just because he brutalized them, he wanted this land, and so he took it. And
yeah,
now it's ours because of him. If he didn't do that, we wouldn't be part of this land.
Okay, but why are we celebrating that as if it's something that's honorable?
Right.
Yeah, I agree.
Because in a sense, from his team, his army, it's a victory. From the Indigenous Peoples Army, it was a loss.
But we call ourselves Americans as if we are Americans.
Yeah, I think us assuming that name, and I think the whole idea of European imperialism and just exploiting different countries for their resources and having that whole white man's burden of thinking we have to civilize like savage behaviors and thinking that Native Americans are savage, and even putting the pipeline that they're putting through that Native American reservation land currently. I just think that people repeatedly disrespect their culture as if it's like lesser or if it's like less intelligent than European culture. So I feel like that's the message behind it.
And it's not necessarily that they're more powerful people; they just have more means to fight with.
Well, also think Christopher Columbus did that in 1492, right? That's how the song goes.
Yeah.
Think about if someone went over to, like, for instance, Mexico, like another country, and just committed genocide on them. We would protest that now because we're a more socially aware society than we were then.
Yeah,
Right,
present day,
and that would just be another war.
Yeah, but we had
That's
that
just
was not a fair war in 1492.
But
Right.
the question to Robbie is, could they have coexisted? Could we have started our own
Right.
colony?
Yes, I do believe they could have. I really do. There was enough land clearly for them to coexist. And then the indigenous, I feel like it was like the indigenous people, like, we were here first. Why should we have to move? And then Columbus didn't realize there was more land or something, so he was like, this is what we want because this is all we know. But you know what I mean? So it was like a pride thing for the indigenous people. It was like the unknowing for Columbus. Whereas I feel like the indigenous people were foragers as it is, so they could have moved. But I understand their pride of wanting to keep their land.
Well, there are certain lands that's sacred. Think about
Right.
Mount Rushmore. We
Right.
built a sculpture to our presidents on their sacred mountains.
Yeah, and the indigenous people were all about their sacred and their rituals and their spirituality. So it does make sense. I was just being devil's advocate, trying to put it in perspective.
Well, think about coexisting. What do you guys think about the way we're taught about the holiday of Thanksgiving, even?
Yeah, I think with the conception of Thanksgiving and that idealistic approach to us like coexisting and how we could have kind of had that peaceful relationship, I do think it's a nice thing to want for a society. I think that's like the basis of like peacemaking, but I just think the nature of man and like capitalism, like with a civilized society, just you go for greed and power, kind of like Game of Thrones. Even if you're coexisting with another people, there's a tendency for one of them to have kind of that power over the other and create a hierarchy. I feel like it always happens. There's always a hierarchy created.
People are power hungry.
Yep.
Well, I mean, from my standpoint, I think about the way we treated Native Americans and the way I was taught in elementary school about certain things, and I feel cheated in a way. I feel like I was lied to in public school education about what actually happened.
There's a glorification.
It's like
there
if you're not going to tell us the truth, just wait till we're mature enough to hear the truth. Don't give us a false idea of what it really was. If just because we're young, just don't tell us about it at all, and then we'll figure out the truth when it's time. You know?
Yeah, like I was. In my elementary school, I was making like Native American headdresses on Thanksgiving and putting them up and thinking that that's what actually happened, that we just shared bread, but that's not.
I mean, in the end, I love the Monday off.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
the most important thing at the end of the day.
It's like Columbus Day.
And it is important to celebrate Indigenous peoples too. Maybe one day we'll be able to figure out
2 different holidays, so we get 2 Mondays off.
Yeah.
And that's what you take from this.
One day, hopefully, we'll figure it out. But for now, we just gotta celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day and Columbus Day simultaneously. Join us for the next segment. Okay, so next we're going to be talking about something that I'm sure we have all talked about way too much the past few days, but we can't go without it being discussed. Recently, Donald Trump had some comments released of a 2005 video of him saying some pretty crude remarks about women. He talked about grabbing women by their pussy. He talked about trying to seduce married women and basically talked about women like they were objects. And it offended a lot of people. So, I mean, Molly being the only female panelist, what are you thinking about it?
Quite honestly, being a politically active person myself, even as an independent, I'm disgusted, to be honest. I just think, I do think the moderators for the debate were pretty vigilant in trying to get him to own up to his actions, and I do respect that. But for those that pretend sexual assault isn't an issue, and I'm not going to group Donald Trump's supporters into a basket of deplorables, but for them to say, like, I saw so many replies to tweets. The woman, there was an account on Twitter, and she encouraged women to share their sexual abuse stories, and there were countless replies from Trump supporters saying that sexual assault and rape just wasn't real. And for people to think that is just disgusting, and it's really hard as a woman just to like witness someone saying that and running for the highest like power in office. It's just, even if he is a figurehead in some ways, it's just an awful representation to just young children and boys in particular, of just misrepresentation of how people should behave. And I just think also that people often think that the way a mother treats her son will dictate how he behaves in the future, but there are studies conducted that actually prove that the male influence in a family structure is actually what dictates how like man treats like women in the future. So I think to have a male role in politics, saying lewd comments like this and just kind of trumping it up to locker room talk is just kind of sad.
Yeah, I mean, normally he would have to, if it was anyone else, they'd have to own up to what they said and apologize, whereas Donald Trump just dismisses it as locker room talk. What do you think about it, Bernsey?
Yeah, I think it's definitely not locker room talk. I know a lot of athletes have come out and said, like, I've been in a lot of locker rooms and I've never heard people talk like that. So that's the first thing. Second of all, okay, so he said he didn't really apologize, but he said words are different than actions. So he said he just said this stuff but didn't do it. I wouldn't be surprised if he did it, but we don't know. It's what Molly said, is that this guy's running for the top office in our country, and whether or not somebody that would ever talk like that should not be in that position. So that's basically what it comes down to for me. And like, there's no way I would ever consider voting for him. So,
Robbie, what do you think about how these comments make us look to other countries in the world?
It's like going off what Molly said. He's not a great representation of what young men in America are, you know, or young women too. It's not a good representation of the United States as a whole. If he does, I mean, there's sides to him sometimes that I think I understand what he's saying and I can see where he's coming from, but the way he presents them are terrible.
Well, yeah, that is a whole other topic of conversation. Is Donald Trump made out to be this huge villain, or are there certain things that he just doesn't know how to do because he's not a politician? Right,
and like some people are voting for him because he's not a politician. That we need someone else that is outside of the whole game in there, who who has the influence. Like during the debate, he barely like listened to the
moderator.
The moderator. He controlled his own flow of talking.
For him.
But is that someone we want leading our country? Is the question.
If he can control a debate like that, where it's normally structured, and he's stubborn, and that's not a bad thing.
I would beg to differ on that. I would say that being stubborn in the system of politics that we have, there are so many people in our system of government. It's not a dictatorship. We can't have someone who's stubborn leading our country.
He could become a tyrant, yeah.
I think what Robbie's getting at is the fact that in negotiating situations with maybe foreign powers and stuff, he's not willing to like play the game. But our typical impression of a politician is someone who has to be able to play the game. And as gross as politics has become in that sense, to be able to negotiate and compromise on things. I don't think compromise is a word that he's used to using, because in business there's generally a winner and a loser. And it's all about kind of wringing people out for as much as you can get from them, and making that a success. So I don't know if he understands like that just completely dictating peace treaties and conversations isn't necessarily the way to like make our world better. Like the U.S. being a front runner isn't the best thing if you're leaving other nations like in turmoil at the same time.
Right. That was what I was getting at.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, I think there are a lot of people that are voting for Trump because they're sick of our government. They're sick of like the way things run, and they think that Trump is some sort of way out. But I don't really think that's the case. I don't think Trump is the right way out of whatever's going on.
Right. I think that, and Trump's main argument, it seems, is that Hillary's crooked. And the thing is, I think every president has done some behind-the-scenes work that we don't know about. The thing that scares me about Hillary is she got caught.
She's not good at hiding it.
Right. She got caught.
But at the same time, regardless of what party you are, she has been in the limelight for such a long time that you're like, no wonder she's been caught doing something at this point.
Yeah. I mean, your average president is like, they're president for 8 years. They probably spent some time in the Senate. But think about how long she's been in politics.
Right, for 20,
as a first lady, too.
And all the different roles she's assumed. It's interesting to see something like that.
And it's funny, I saw like a post on Facebook, because it's funny how Trump comes back at Bill Clinton trying to criticize. It said Trump wants us to forget something he said 11 years ago, but he criticizes Hillary for her husband 20 years ago. So
Yeah.
that's
You can't eliminate the things that he said by coming at Bill Clinton, because at the end of the day, Bill Clinton isn't running for president. It's Hillary.
Exactly.
And just dragging that into the situation just lacks a lot of class, I feel like.
Oh yeah, the whole back and forth about the whole thing is like, this is what it's really about, And he dodges questions about policies and everything that really matters.
He comes at Hillary a lot. Do any of you guys think that Donald Trump's digs at Hillary are rooted in sexism, or do you think that he just thinks Hillary is crooked?
No, I think there's an innate sexism in Donald Trump, and not to defend him. Obviously, he's a product of his time period and a product of his social class. I think that's a lot of it because he's not really used to dealing with women in high-powered positions. But I do think that's a cultural product. I don't excuse it whatsoever, but I do think he has that kind of inbred into him.
Yeah, there's a lot of innate sexism in his generation as a whole. So.
Yeah, I mean, he comes at Hillary's character a lot. He's always talking about her character. And what do you think about his comment about Hillary's stamina?
I think it's funny because he had said that she didn't have enough stamina for the role, but then his compliment to her at the end of the debate was how determined and driven she was. So I mean, he contradicts himself quite often, but it was just funny for him to criticize that when he's older than her, and then basically just neg his statements as a whole by saying that she's very driven and hardworking, and basically that she has a lot of stamina for the role itself.
Yeah, Donald Trump is certainly an enigma. I don't really understand him at all, but maybe we'll figure out on November 8th what America really thinks. Join with us next so we can talk about what do millennials like better, food or sex? Hi, and welcome back to our last segment of UMass Yak Back. Today we're going to be talking about a Huffington Post article that showed that millennials, the majority, a small majority, like 54%, agree that eating food is just as enjoyable as having sex. Robbie, I'm going to throw this to you first. What are your thoughts on this? This is our generation.
Yeah, it is so much easier to eat food than have sex, and it's just as enjoyable. It gives me just as much satisfaction.
That's crazy.
Think about it. You can go to the store and buy food. You can't go to the store and buy sex.
Prostitution.
Yeah, you can.
Legally.
Okay, but Molly, what do you think? Why is this a characteristic of millennials specifically?
I think because, you think of people from the 20s onward, food is scarcity in general. So I think there's this mentality of just eating to be full and to get through the day, as opposed to our generation has a fixation, especially with Instagram and stuff.
Yeah.
We have a huge fixation on the aesthetics of food, cooking culture, just the restaurants and lavish lifestyle of eating out and stuff has definitely grown as a career. So we fixate a lot on kind of the sensory aspect of food. And I love watching food videos and
Tasty.
on Facebook they have Tasty, which is that BuzzFeed very quick recipe channel, and they love to just pile ice cream on ice cream and fudge on fudge and just add so much crap to it. But people really like get off on that.
Well, I was thinking the other day, like before I even read this article, the way they film those tasty videos, it's like they're trying to make it sexualized.
Yes.
Like the way they like zoom in.
Oh my God.
Yeah, at the
Or
end.
like if they're doing chocolate, they're like seductively pour it on and make it slow
The ones that
motion.
really like gets me going, it's the one where like they scrape the ice cream into those little rolls. You know what I'm talking about? It's like, and they put it in little cups.
Because
with
it's
little
like
tongs.
it's like an aesthetic thing.
Yeah, it's like popping a pimple.
You know what's interesting though? A lot of people say that we're a generation who's more concerned about health than previous generations. Like we're concerned about like non-GMO and like eating clean, yet at the same time we're also fixated on these unhealthy foods.
Actually, now I think about it, I think we like food better because what I said initially, it's easier to attain for certain people. For everyone. I mean, I'm sure food's easier to attain for everyone in the U.S.
I mean, speak for yourself.
But I think at the same time,
Okay, 'cause,
though.
like, go ahead.
At the same time, though, I feel like because we're so knowledgeable on food now, like even with cigarettes, like a ton of people still smoke cigarettes even though they know it's bad for you. I think especially with fast food and stuff, how that's become popularized over the last like 40 years. Even though we know it's bad for us, we still love it, and it's kind of that indulgence factor. I'm not really sure, but.
Well, I mean, sex and food go in the same hand in hand if you're using that term, indulgence. It's the same.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like the less availability you have of something, the more value it has to you. You know what I mean?
So,
The less
so you're saying
readily available something is, the more value it should hold.
So for you, it's availability. It's not like
So
if
I
I
think
have
that
cheese
sex
fries
is
in
more
front of me
valuable
and I
to
have
me.
someone who wants to have sex with me, you'd pick the sex.
Yes, because you can always go back and
okay.
have the cheese fries. Did you say cheese fries?
I said cheese fries, yes.
So
I was
like it's
thinking
like
about it.
whatever's less readily available holds more value.
Interesting.
Because what the article said was, eating food is just as enjoyable as having sex.
Yeah, which is interesting. Did the article have any biological backing or just conjecture?
No, it was just talking. It was polls that they made it with people from various
thought.
generations, and it goes up as you go to our generation.
Because I'm curious, like, if someone were to do a study, how pleasurable people would test, like, in, like, an EKG or something as, like, eating food as opposed to, like, having sex with someone. Like, if that triggers the same...
Right, the same sensory...
areas in your
Well,
brain.
if you're thinking, if it's for instant gratification, like,
Yeah.
Bernsey, do you think we're a generation that's dependent on instant gratification now?
Well, I was just thinking, think about if you were on a desert island and you could have a lifetime supply of sex or a lifetime supply of food, what would you choose?
Well,
You're
gonna
choose
die.
the sex. You will.
You're going to die, so food.
Right.
Well, yeah, but you can make it. Are you talking about like food I want, or if I could make
Coconuts.
if I could like make a living off coconuts, I'd rather repopulate the island.
Actually, well, that's a good
That's
point.
true, that's
It's
a good
two
point.
things that are like, it's instant gratification versus like things that are important later, kind of.
I think it's an interesting concept as well because both food and repopulation are complete survival necessities.
Right.
But at the
Yeah.
same time, they double as just
Luxuries.
Luxuries, exactly. So it's very
kind of crazy.
interesting. to
Well,
think about.
on the terms of why it might be more, the food was rated more popular for millennials themselves, is because probably millennials have been having less sex than the generations above.
You think so?
Well, they've been having sex for years, so they're used to it.
Oh.
You know what I mean? They're more
Yeah.
experienced. They know it. They know what it's about. Like, not that it's old to them, but it's
Yeah.
not as exciting for the millennials. Like the sex culture for us is still new.
But
you know?
it's casual.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
And we
Yeah.
get
Well, if
married later.
we're talking about the rise of like tasty videos and food porn. Think about how dependent our generation is. Males, I don't know, mostly males, dependent on regular porn.
Just
Males, a lot of males in our generation don't feel like they need sex if they can just sit and eat some cheese fries and jack off to some porn.
because they can have both now.
Yeah,
Right.
Porque no los dos.
they're developing virtual reality goggles that are
Porn goggles.
porn goggles.
Yeah.
You can look around and you literally
What's
think
gonna
you're
be
in
real
it.
anymore? Holy shit.
Isn't
Crap.
that crazy? Well, I mean, I know sometimes if I'm starving, I'll look through Instagram food porn and I'll like feel like I don't ever feel like I actually ate something, but I'll
That's
look at it.
torture. That's torture. That's not
Something
satisfactory.
you need to talk to someone about.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I don't know. If I had to pick one thing I could have the rest of my life and still survive
Yeah.
without either one, I don't know.
I think that you would choose sex if you could still survive.
Right.
Yeah, if you could
but-
still survive, then sex.
Like, how could you go
clearly.
without like your favorite food?
Well, I
think-
think that you would choose sex. I really
I think it
you
would change the perception of food if everyone had to do that. If everyone had to survive on like just bread forever,
Like the way it was before.
Yeah, then the perception of food would not become so like
But now
idealized.
we're so lectured.
I think that's the most telling part. I think the only reason the millennials said that food is just enjoyable as sex is because we have so much at our fingertips. And we,
Especially at UMass, Jesus.
Yeah.
Food is bomb.
yeah, like going to Burke could be just as well as getting laid, you know?
Like, let's have a threesome at Burke. Eating
Three-
wise.
3 plates.
Yeah, right?
Well, that was an interesting discussion. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Yak Back, and we'll see you back next week. Thanks for joining us.